Click on oral bronchoscopy for an example of a normal airway. The first page teaches you the 3 basic movements for smooth driving of a bronchoscope. We've explained these in our other video called Operating the Bronchoscope. Click on Start Tutorial to load the scenario. Before you begin, familiarise yourself with the screen controls and monitors. On the right side of the screen are 2 monitors, a pulse oximeter and a measure of the scope tip pressure. It's important to click the oxygen on before starting any scenario. If you don't do this, the oxygen saturation will drop and the pulse oximeter will alarm at 85%, and this will incur a penalty in your score. The scope pressure monitor tells you if your scope is wedged against the tissue, and when this happens, you need to withdraw slightly and find a patent route. On the other side of the screen, there are 5 icons. An arrow for choosing whether to have an oral or nasal entry point, a position button so that you can change the patient from lying to sitting. If you click this, the face will rotate after the scope is inserted into the desk sensor. A control to make the patient take a deep breath. A camera to take screenshots. You can also take a screenshot using button 4 on the handset. And the 5th icon, a volume button for the pulse oximeter. At the top of the screen, there are 3 tabs. Scope View is the usual view seen through a flexible bronchoscope. Orbit View allows you to see a 3D view of the airway and lungs while you're doing a scenario, and this can be rotated and zoomed by using the mouse. This orbit view is very useful for teaching anatomy. The 3rd tab is a reference map of the lungs showing scope views at various locations. Now we're ready to perform a normal oral bronchoscopy. Insert the scope into the desk sensor until you see the software respond. This patient is supine. The key message here is to use slow, sequential exposure of anatomy. As you insert the scope, keep the patient's teeth and tongue horizontal. As you proceed, identify important midline landmarks, which will help to guide you to the larynx. These are the uvula, the epiglottis, and the vocal cords, in that order. As you enter the mouth, you should follow the center of the tongue. If the tongue disappears from your view, simply adjust your lever downwards to keep the tongue visible on screen. Keep your thumb on the lever at all times. As you reach the back of the tongue, push down on the lever a little more to direct the scope upwards and insert until you see the epiglottis. Now direct the scope under the epiglottis and the vocal cords will come into view. Proceed towards the vocal cords. If you wish, you can spray the cords with lidocaine by pressing 1 on the handset. Pass through the cords. Clinical application. As you go through the vocal cords, push the lever up slightly so that the scope tip drops down as you move into the trachea. The orbit view will show you why this is important. When the bronchoscope tip is at the vocal cords, we switch to the orbit view by clicking the tab at the top of the screen. You can see that the angle of the scope approaching the cords means that the scope would eventually collide with the cricoid ring. However, if you drop the tip slightly, the scope will move smoothly into the lumen of the trachea, heading towards the carina. This is particularly important in children, where the cricoid ring is more prominent and the lumen is smaller. Once you reach the carina, you're instructed to withdraw the scope. Wait a few seconds and you'll get your score.